Hey guys, Jarretman here, doing some 200 zoom today. I deleted a few of my videos that were older and they had the HUD stats still shown in them just because I don't want to show players HUD stats. And I shouldn't have had the HUD on to begin with. I was just leaving it on because I wasn't thinking about it. But yeah, I'm going to record more 200 zoom. I'll record more other stakes and post some videos occasionally. And that's what I'm doing today. Gonna play 2 tables of 200 zoom. There is a 500 zoom pool running, but it's pretty small. It's less attractive to start betting this 3 ways than it is heads up versus the big blind, because the small blind's calling range is going to be a lot tighter than the big blind's calling range. A small blind does not get as attractive of a spot to call pre-flop as the big blind does, because the big blind's closing the action and gets a bigger discount on his call. So therefore the small blind's calling range is much more tight. He has to be much more selective. He doesn't get to call the small blind with like 8-6 suited. It's been a while since I've played 200 zoom. Some names I recognize. Most names I don't recognize. So I'm not really sure who the regs are as much anymore, if there's any new regs, but that doesn't matter. We're gonna play basically the same versus everyone. For the ace-x that I want to raise, I want it to be the lowest ones. This one's kind of like in the middle. We could do both. I'm gonna raise versus someone who I have, and we're gonna check back table one. I'm gonna raise versus someone that I'm likely it's gonna be a weaker player. He's playing short. He donked half pot after calling small blind versus cutoff. I think that we just get more value and win the pot more often when we raise the flop. Obviously calling cannot be bad. Table one, I don't think we need to bluff this. We could have bet the turn. Our hand's a mix here on table one between raise and fold, I'm pretty sure, but we're in a video. We'll go for the raise. If someone's c-betting with their entire range on the board, these are the types of hands that get shifted into raising more often. And if someone is over-folding to the raise, then you want to be raising those a lot. However, I think it's pretty easy to defend on this board. I don't think there's that many creative floats from the button versus the check raise on this board. Like maybe some of the backdoor hands some people miss, but otherwise it's not that crazy. The ace-side boards, we don't float as many of these backdoor flush hands, but this one has, okay, we get 100. So I was gonna say this one has 2 straight draws, 2 backdoor straight draws, I should say. And while we do have the low interaction portion and some higher gut shots to raise the flop with, like 3-4, 5-4, and then the broadways, I think this hand does get mixed into the check raise some of the time. Mostly just giving up turns where you don't improve. And we don't raise the flop as much with the Broadway region straight draws. So like we'll raise the flop significantly less with Queen Jack than we would with 3-4 and 4-5. But we will raise it sometimes. And the king is kind of bad for us because now we can't really raise thin. We don't hit many 2 pairs on the river. Just going to give this one up. This wasn't a king high board. Usually the middle card pairing where the big blind has an advantage in trips is a good card to start bluffing at, even with some no equity hands, but this board is kind of less attractive. We do block 9-8 of hearts from the cutoff low frequency. But it's not as much of a thing because the cutoff's going to mainly bet the turn. I expect to get heroed a decent amount in this spot, but that's fine. We do have a decent amount of 9x. They're going to check the turn as well. Just betting range on table 2. When I'm bluffing here, I want to pick a size that my 9x wants to bet mostly. No, we want to split here. We want to have two sizes. We want to have a smaller size for our medium kings, I think. At least some of the time. This is kind of out of line on table 2. Gonna bluff the river on table 2. Okay, never mind. Not going to bluff raise the river. It's interesting he leads the river but didn't lead the turn because I don't know, it's not like he's uncapped on this river. I guess he does improve to Jack 10. Our hand's really close on table 1 versus the big bet. I'll peel 1 with the backdoor flush draw. The problem with our hand is that if we hit the king, he has queen 10 for a straight. And he bets so big that we do fold some pairs on the flop. Like we fold some 9x, we fold some 2x. Usually our worst 9x, and then kind of like half of our 2x, I think. I'm having trouble finding worse hands here on table 1 when I think about my range. After the 8 of diamonds comes in, I'm just thinking about what size I want to bluff. I don't think blocking 2s is that relevant, but I want to bet a size that's repping a straight or a flush or a jack X here. And versus like, okay, good hero called. I was going to say if I knew I was playing versus good regs, they would recognize that the 1/3 size is not reserved for only very weak hands in this spot, because the flop was big bet call. The 1/3 size can be some jack X, some flushes. It starts to get a little too thin to pile with jack 7 here. Like obviously I can have some missed straight draws still, like king queen and king 10. However, king, queen, and king 10, when they do have the diamond blocker, it's going to do a decent amount of raising. And I don't think the 2 showdown value. This is annoying facing the min cold 4, but this is just the worst hand to call a cold 4 bet with. I don't think our 2 showdown value is that high in this spot in reality. And we do have a lot of flushes, a lot of jack X, a lot of straights. I don't think we can only bluff our king, queen, and king 10 here. Because after he bets big on the flop, we're not floating with like, you know, ace 10 offsuit with, even with the ace of diamonds, I don't know if we're floating that. I think we're folding that. Betting range table 2. We'll check back ace queen here. It's close between being able to kind of bet for value, but hijack big blind, it's less good to bet for value, I guess, if you want to classify it as anything. Like you get, what I should say is you get floated by worst ace highs less when you're hijack versus big blind than when you do button versus big blind. We'll peel the turn. I think he has tons of like missed straight draws. Sorry, he has tons of straight draws. And just random spazzes. This river size sucks. I think he hit a 6. This is the river size he's saying that he hit a 6 with. I'm gonna try to get him to fold a 6. This is completely out of line, obviously. No good explanation for why I'm doing this other than I'm just trying to get him to fold a 6. Maybe that's too ambitious. Or a 4. Yeah, okay. It was too ambitious. He wasn't gonna fold the 6 if he's gonna call the 4. Maybe I should have jammed the river. I was trying to rep a hand like aces or kings or queens that could check back the flop on this board. However, I don't think he would expect me to do that, so when we have this hand, we block a decent amount of the folding range. So it's not a great hand to start bluffing on the flop. Also, it's kind of in this region where it has like a modicum of showdown value, king high being blind read blind. Then on the turn, I don't think we need to float our worst king highs versus the 1/3 bet. Definitely will be floating a lot though in this spot. We are allowed to have some folds though. Mainly we're allowed to have folds because our range is so wide and weak still, which is allowed because we got such a good discount pre-flop and we're in position. Ace jack off is too weak to start using as a 4-bet bluff here with those positions. It's close though, like you wouldn't be, it's not like you'd be torching if you 4-bet bluff that. Table 2 is a board where a larger size makes the most sense, as the range of symmetry is that we have overpairs he doesn't, and those overpairs do need a decent amount of protection, therefore betting big makes sense. Not to mention they just increase the size of the pot versus a 10 and an 8 and a lot of his hands. But I'm just gonna bet 1/3. Just playing simple in these videos. I'll save the larger bets for in-game or something. I don't know. Basically, it sounds stupid, but really just you can choose whatever size you want on the flop usually. Like you'll have small EV gains for choosing the optimal size. Of course, but if you know how to play a certain size, like for example, if you knew how to play overbet on every single flop perfectly, but you knew that 1/3 was the best size on certain boards and you just decided to play 1/3 but you didn't know how to follow up turns and rivers, then you would, the overbet strategy that you knew perfectly would outperform the 1/3 that you didn't know, and vice versa. Knowing your strategy better is going to outperform a complicated strategy that you don't know very well. All right, we'll get in queens here. Not the most exciting spot to get in queens, however. When there's this guy left behind, he's less incentivized to call because he's not in absolute position, so his range could be a bit wider in this spot, and we have pocket queens, like whatever. Sometimes you'll have kings, sometimes you'll have aces, that's poker. And yeah, after he 4-bets that big, he probably does have to call with ace-queen off there. That's why I think 4-betting that big is probably not good. Small blind versus any position single raise pot on ace high boards are super interesting to me. This strategy that I'm doing here, just like betting 1/3 a lot, is not the greatest versus that range, but our hand makes a nice check back, our hand makes a nice bet. The added equity of the backdoor nut flush draw combined with the backdoor straight draw, I think wants to push us towards mainly betting. Table 1, our hand can check back, our hand can bet. We want to do both. Okay, we get a check back. I think we want to, maybe that was a mistake. I don't know if we want to check back that much. Like, we do want to have some check backs, especially with these ranges where he is condensed around 9s and 10s more than we are, but we still have those hands. And we have the overpair advantage still, so I think we'll reopen for pot here on table 1. Just gonna use one size and we'll reopen relatively polar here. A lot of his range does not want to face the pot size bet on the turn. Another option is to bet 1/3 and try to target his really weak portion of his range. We're gonna go for a check table 2. Gonna fold the 6s versus the 35 big blind stack. We could shove as well if we knew he was like crazy. If we had fold equity, then shoving 6s becomes good because you're doing pretty well versus the calling range, which is going to be like ace queen and ace king a lot. We could check raise even, I think, versus this 1/3 size on table 2, which is what I'm going to do. I don't think people are necessarily balancing this range out. I think versus this line, we have the nuts. I think we can bet river. I don't want to go too crazy large, though. Our hand makes a really nice bet on table 1. I'm thinking about overbetting on table 2 just because the majority of my range that check raises the turn does want to overbet. And maybe in his mind, I mean, because he thinks that we're polar. But anyways, yeah, I think the queen is just the nuts there. We're going to check table 1. That's a bad river. However, after we bet super big on the flop, he loses a lot of his ace high that doesn't have something going on. I think he's going to have a tough time versus this bet here on table 1. And yeah, he has a hand that I basically expect him to have there. We get hero by the 5s. Probably fine. I'm not opening this pure from under the gun, but we'll just open it, whatever. Making a video, right? Again, a board where a larger size makes more sense, I think. And we're versus an unknown, weaker player with a hand like, if there's any hand that wants to bet big on this board, it's pocket jacks because it needs the most protection and gets the most quote-unquote value still by using a large bet. This is interesting now on the turn, especially him being a little bit shorter. We're incentivized to trap a bit more. And if he does have a hand like ace 5, ace 2, 7 something, we don't mind letting him see the river. Just betting the normal size with pocket jacks here. We're in a horrible spot versus a check jam, actually, because he's repping straights and... Okay, yeah. See, when he has hands like this, we don't mind letting him see the river. Okay, we're going to call and kind of hate life, maybe bluff rivers on table 1. So it was a limp pot. He bet the flop for 1 big blind. We call, turns the 8 of hearts, and we peel again. And now on the river, he's betting 1/3. The problem is that people really revolve their range around having a heart here when they do bluff the turn. So they end up on the river with a very strong range that, while I can still bluff into, I don't think it's that attractive. Just gotta fold the queen 9 suited. We roll a 5. It's already close on the button there. We're gonna start with the check on table 1. I don't think we get to bet our range here, and I like to play this board as a big bet. And if we're playing this board as a big bet, then we definitely need to have a pretty defined checking range. Because I really want to bet big when I have like jacks, queens, kings here, just targeting his 10x. So it's nice to include interesting spot, table 2 versus the short stack. If I had more information, I might even fold here. But I'm going to call. He can... the problem, what I'm thinking here is that short stacks usually shove ace king in this spot. So I'm just going to fold. I'm just going to fold. And I think we have a clear block on table 1. Our hand even strong enough to bet bigger, I think, but he has pocket 9s. Block puts a lot of his range in a tougher spot, I think. We can bluff catch with hands that are like ace queen, ace king. We don't need to necessarily include this into the bluff catch range too often. I think, at least. I don't know. It feels like a hand that really wants to bet the river small. The interesting part in this hand is what would we do versus the raise. I'm just thinking of what part of my blocking range has better blockers versus his raising range. Because when he raises, he's just repping a 10, really. Like, pocket 8s isn't going to check back the turn. No set's really going to check back the turn in practice, even though you will see that it's supposed to trap some sets. So the ace of hearts is not the best. We don't have the best ace 8 here. We would rather have ace 8 of spades because that blocks ace 10 suited, because he doesn't, or at least he's not supposed to have ace 10 off in the calling range here. So I think we would fold this one and then mix when we have the ace 8 that blocks the 10x. Because ace 8 of spades blocks ace 10 of spades and like the low frequency 10-8 of spades, but that's not checking back on the turn, I don't think. Versus a smaller size, we would float. Versus the large size, I think we have an easy fold. We have pocket 9s as well. That would make a better block call than ace 8 of hearts. especially the ones that double block the 10, but even the ones that single block the 10-8 suit, 10-9 suited are going to be better calls than this. Also, I don't think he's... The problem with nines versus this hand is that... We'll start with a check on table 1. The problem with nines versus this hand is that nines does block some of his bluffing range, where I'm not sure if he's turning ace high into a bluff. So we kind of unblock his bluffs with ace 8 here. Anyways, I think these spots are super interesting on the river. When you get to the river and you're thinking about which hands want to call versus fold after you block. With the hijack caller, I'm less happy to 3-bet a hand like this. Not a good spot, table 1. But pretty clear call. Okay. He was pretty strong. Interesting river check. Jack's the nuts there, bro. Gonna start with a lot of checks on table 2. Our hand isn't terrible to bet. But overall, this board, the big blind interacts with better than the small blind. And the fact that we're so deep relative to the pot, the range asymmetry where we have the overpairs and he doesn't matter as much. I think this performs very well. I don't think it's approved. Because if I'm betting with this hand, I'm just saying I'm basically betting with everything. But here, betting with these air hands is allowed anyways. Just betting them all the time, you're going to end up with way too weak of a range. I really like bluffing the river, though. I do improve to some 2 pairs on the river, as well as some like pocket 10. So I think an overbet makes him... We can still overbet like king 9 here as well. King 8. Okay, yeah. Pretty clear call from him there. I like having exactly this hand to bet big on the river because I think his strongest hands are mostly king jack and king 9. Like this blocks a lot of his good king X region because I think king queen is supposed to, if not pure raise, mostly raise versus the small bet on the turn. So I really like our blockers. Also, we have the obvious trade of not blocking his flush draws and not really blocking that many of his straight draws either. Obviously the 9 blocks some, but those are going to bet the flop a decent amount. Versus the small 3-bet, we'll just call. Versus a large size 3-bet, this hand can start getting bluffed with these positions because these positions are so tight. Easy fold on the flop versus the overbet. We roll a check raise here. We're a bit deeper, so I was thinking, do we just not want to check raise? And if we do want to check raise ace jack, we want to have the ace of clubs being deeper on the flop, just being in really, really horrible turns and river spots. Loose open here on table 2 with the 200 zoom rake. Our hand's still really strong on the turn. I'm going to overbet turn, check call river, or check fold river, depending on the river, of course. This is getting a little thin, I'm not going to lie. It's getting a little thin. With these positions, this deep, little bit thin. Okay, I think we can fold now. When we overbet the turn, this is the absolute bottom of our value range, I would say, if you want to consider anything a value range. Like, yes, he can find bluffs here. He can find some super high equity combo draws to bluff. Okay, well 4-bet the king jack suited. This is a rather large cold 4-bet, almost 3x. I think I'm just going to fold the 6s. We'll peel 6s here though. See a flop. Pretty nice flop for pocket 6s, I would say. If he checks, we'll check back sometimes. And if he bets, we're going to just call. We really want to force him to play turns and rivers here with our range. Yes, when we have 6s, we'll start with a half pot bet here on table 1. I think we're allowed to just bet our air pretty heavily. Even our very, very worst hands, we're allowed to just at least bet sometimes. In table 2, we will check back sometimes. Yeah, we get a check back. And I'll check back the queen 10 here. Being our worst queen, I think it's fine to have this as a check back sometimes. We bet only half pot, so he can have king queen of spades, ace queen off, even queen jack of spades he can have. And table 2, it's close between raising and calling. And table 1 is a very clear value bet. I am going to just call. I have a lot of flushes in my range. Okay. I'm going to sit out here because I just want to talk about that hand real quick. Because it might look a little weird to some people. So let me make this bigger. All right, so small blind 3-bet versus cutoff. We get this flop. He bets kind of like a almost 1/3 size. And what I meant was that our range wants to force him to play turns and rivers. So if we raise here, he can jam. And because we started only 100 big blinds deep, he can jam over pairs and be fine with it. He's not too worried about it. So it doesn't really incentivize a lot of our range to raise here, because it doesn't really put him in a tough spot, does it? Like if we only, yes, we have some hands that want to raise, like sets, because they're just really, really strong hands. However, if we think about what most of his range is, if we think about the small blind 3-betting range versus the cutoff, most of his range is just overcards, just hands that are drawing dead versus 6s. So while the board does look scary, it looks like there's a lot of draws and there's a lot of cards that devalue our 6s. Absolutely, the relative value of 6s stays very high, even across like a 3 or a 7 on the turn, because most of his range is over pairs or overcards. Let's say he does have a hand like ace king and we raise the flop, he's gonna fold. But let's say we just call and the turn's a king or an ace and he bets. We're probably gonna stack him at some point. So yeah, calling is kind of nice here, I would say. And then on the turn, kind of the same logic applies. He bets the flop, we call. First of all, the flop's not a great flop to bet, but yeah, that's aside. So now when he's on the turn and he's got still mostly overcards over pairs, because that's just what his range looks like pre-flop, letting those overcards see the river is, again, not that bad. He will have some draws here. Like he will have maybe a hand like ace queen of hearts that can take this line, diamond hands that can take this line. However, we're not really denying equity versus those hands if we bet. We're just charging them, which is good, of course. We're ahead versus those hands, so it's nice to have those hands put money into the pot behind. However, it's not like we're denying any equity. His folding range is very well defined around mostly overcards that are drawing dead. So betting this hand does not seem that efficient on the turn, I would say. Only folding out hands that are drawing dead versus us. We'd rather bet a hand that needs some protection versus those overcards like pocket sevens. So we check back, and now on the river, when we're on the turn here and we do have a hand that has 2 diamonds in it, unless it's a very high equity hand like ace 4 of diamonds, or even like, I don't know, 9-8 of diamonds, but even then, we don't want to bet and get check jammed on here when we have diamonds. So we end up checking a lot of diamond hands on the turn, a lot of flush draws, and we end up betting just kind of like our air on the turn. Like if we floated the flop with king, queen of hearts, let's say, and now we're on, sorry, not king, queen of hearts, just king, queen with the king of hearts, or the king, queen with the king of diamonds, or we floated the flop with, I don't know, ace, queen with the queen of diamonds. We end up betting those types of hands on the turn that don't care as much if we get check jammed. And then our diamonds end up checking back a decent amount. So when we're on the river and he bets into us, his betting range is going to be pocket tens and flushes for value, really. Like, it's kind of thin to bet an overpair here. Like, maybe he can bet an overpair some of the time. The problem is that are we going to get called when we jam? And he does have the overpair when we definitely have so many flushes. I'm not sure. Like, maybe we're still supposed to jam and I was just a nit calling it down, but I think his range is going to be, in practice at least, bluffs or hands that are bluffs or hands that are better than us almost already when the action goes like this. Anyways, that's a lot about that hand, but I thought it was a kind of cool hand. We could 3-bet this. I think cutoff versus hijack. It's a little... I'm just going to make the tight nitty fold. Very, very good board for us. Neither of us really have 2x. If anyone does, it's me having ace-2 suited. Okay, we get the bet here. I'm going to bet half pot, though. I think another option here would just be bet 1/3 with your range. I think it's fine. However, I think we need to have checkbacks regardless. And it's not because this board is bad for us. It's because his range is still condensed a lot, where our range still has a lot of overcards and air. But because we're polar and he's not, it ends up being a better spot for us. Okay, we roll a check back here. Definitely want to balance out some checkbacks on the turn. When we have a hand like ace king, we might be incentivized to check back the turn sometimes. We want to be able to check back some other hands like pocket jacks, pocket tens, pocket nines. And I'm debating between jamming and raising here. I think I'm going to go for the raise, just the normal raise. He does have pocket queens, he does have pocket tens, and I could see both of those hands blocking the river. And I can also see some hands like jacks and nines, eights blocking the river versus ace king and then calling versus the raise. But when I raise, I'm kind of isolating myself. If I jammed, I mean, I'm kind of isolating myself to almost better hands. I'm just going to fold here. I'm timing out. I didn't really think about the spot. Okay, he has a 10. Okay. Yeah, so if I jam, I think I'm isolating myself to hands that beat me, or like ace queen, which I block. I was gonna say, if I'm feeling out of line here, it's a nice board to just do this. Give him the raise, give him the raisey daisy. That's my board. You can't really So in theory, he can't really bet that board super aggressively because I have the trips advantage. However, if you find someone betting this board too much, then you can start raising them. But then if they know that you're raising them, they can start 3-betting you or floating you super wide. So it's kind of just, back to let's just play solid. We don't really know what our opponents are doing. Even if you have big samples on someone, you'll never actually know what they're doing. And people are getting better and improving, or at least changing for the worse or for the better. So a read you had on someone yesterday might not be accurate 2 weeks from now. We'll 3-bet this some of the time on table 1. It's such a weird way to say it, but thank you. You were very pleasant to listen to. It's like a way to pick up girls at the bar. Excuse me, ma'am, you were very pleasant to listen to. I'm not sure what your success rate would be with that one. So deciding between betting and checking, our hand is still strong enough to bet. Probably strong enough to go for 3 anyways. Gonna do something a little cheeky here. Don't think it's that much of a thing on double draw. I think we're incentivized to use a lot of really, really big bets here, targeting most of his range, which is going to be some sort of draw. And versus this bet, he's in a really easy spot. However, I think he's in a tougher spot with a different portion of his range. Okay, this is weird. I ISO, get overcalled, and then the limper calls. I'm gonna start with a small bet. Apply a lot of pressure on turns. On most turns anyways. This turn I'm gonna check. This guy here has to worry about this guy in the pot still. So he does not get to float me very wide on the flop. That being said, he ends up betting half pot on the turn. I could realistically see someone, especially because he's unknown to me, I could see someone showing up with King Jack here. And just betting the turn with the intention of checking back the river. I'm going to fold the river now, though. He's just milking me, isn't he? So if he does have a hand like King Jack and he gets to the river, is he ever going to bet this small size? He's just going to check back, isn't he? And I don't think he gets to float the flop with like 6s, 7s with a club. Ace 10 with a club got there. Ace Jack off with the ace of clubs. Probably doesn't bluff for that size. He can exploit me there. That's fine. This exact spot will probably never happen again, even if I played 20 million hands. So tough to get exploited in a spot like that. You can mix in some calls with ace king off versus under the gun and hijack if you wanted to. Low frequency. As you get deeper, it becomes slightly better just because the value of ace king off goes down a lot in 3-bet, 4-bet, 5-bet situations when you're over 200 big blinds deep. We'll see a flop here on table 2. We're deeper with both players and we have a suited ace. Suited aces go up a lot in value when you're deeper. Not to mention, I don't think either of these players are regs, so just want to try to overflush one of them and win it all. Okay, we'll try to play one more interesting spot if we can, and then I'm going to wrap the video up. I think we're approaching close to an hour, 46 minutes. Okay. So I don't want to make the assumption that this random player playing short stacked is going to be playing proper pre-flop ranges. But if he is playing proper pre-flop ranges, holy, that's a tongue twister, then he has a lot at 9x. And our hand needs the most protection out of any overpair, and we're very ahead versus a 9. So I think a big bet makes a lot of sense. And he does not have as much 7x. However, we hardly have any. Give him some rope here if he does have like a 5-6 type hand. If he has a 9, I think I'm just going to stack him no matter what. So I'm not really too worried about stacking a 9. Okay, gave him some rope. He took the rope. He did actually have 2 overs versus my hand. All right, we'll play these last 2 hands, and that'll be it for this video. I don't know what his range looks like, but I'm gonna start betting. Trying to get some value from pairs that are lower than a 10. Okay, so he goes for what is a slightly larger 4-bet in position than normal. And I think our hand is kind of close to folding versus this size already. Yeah, I think we're very close to folding this already, but we'll call for the video. It's the last hand, so pretty bad flop for our range. And we have 10s. We have some like King X suited, but we're just doing very bad here. I don't think we're going to play any raises. Maybe King Queen wants to get in there as a raise just because we're out of position and we just want to, I don't know, not have to play turns and rivers. So we don't call Queen Jack suited preflop versus that size. We have Ace Queen, Ace Jack, maybe some suited connector type hands if we do 3-bet it. Otherwise, this is just our worst hand for sure. And he's gonna be betting range in the flop. The bottom of our value range is going to be like King Jack here, King Jack suited. I think we can jam this. Yeah, he has Ace King, he has Ace King. All right, that's it for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care.